Hi there. Today we have another fantastic episode. We have a wonderful guest, Jessica Adams, here with us, and we're talking about blending intuition with solid sales and marketing strategies to get better results. We talk about feminine and masculine energies. We talk about living in sync with nature and natural cycles, tapping into the power of nature and seasons as a regenerative, life thrilling approach to creativity and productivity without burnout. Jessica is helping entrepreneurs, leaders, founders to create more impact and achieve their big visions, their goals, know themselves better, all of that without burnout by using holistic, focused business mentoring and strategies and using evidence-based behavior change tools, somatic and embodiment practices. She's a leadership facilitator, but also has a very gentle, intuitive, and powerful style of mentorship. And that's just scratching the surface of this wonderful conversation. So come on and let's tune in.
But before we get on with our conversation, we want to remind you we have a newsletter. The link is in the description. Do sign up to our newsletter. We also have a Patreon account where we put our amazing gold nuggets. And today we got a really beautiful gold nugget. So come onto the Patreon account and have a look what it is. It's something that we are growing and it's building up very slowly, but it's building up. And we also would love it if you would subscribe, if you would follow, like, hit notification buttons, whatever it is that you need to do to get reminders when our episodes go up, because we would love for you to also share any of these videos or podcasts, episodes that you hear with friends, colleagues, or anybody who you think could benefit from the conversation. But now let's get back with our wonderful conversation with Jessica.
If you follow her on LinkedIn, you will love her imagery because her brand photos, the way she put herself out there with the visuals, it's just warming my heart every single time I see a post from her. So I'm excited for this conversation. Hi, Jess. Welcome.
Hi Lenka. Hi Natalie. Thanks so much for inviting me on your podcast. Really excited to be here. Thanks for a beautiful introduction.
Well, it's my pleasure. I would love for you to, introduce yourself a little bit more, give a little bit more context to what I've already hinted at. What led you to where you are right now? What journey took you to, embracing nature more in your business? And really, from what I've seen, you've built like such a strong business around nature, in connection with nature, enabling other people to be in touch with nature and yet still really drive and build successful businesses, successful lives, impactful businesses. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Oh, okay. So I was asked this morning actually, but so I never had a proper job and I've always worked for myself and I've always followed that very strong thread of intuition. So I would say that this business is like a weaving of all the skills that I've gathered along my life's journey and put into a lovely basket. And so I started in my 20s as a travel, health and fitness journalist and author and editor, and also did corporate copywriting. And I very much lived life on my own terms after about a year and a half in London, which I absolutely loved. And I had the best job as a journalist there, getting paid to do whatever I wanted to do. Equally, I didn't want to be sitting in an office for my life. And I saw the people ahead of me, the place that I was supposed to be going, and I decided that wasn't for me. So I left London and moved to Bristol in the southwest of England, which is extremely green. And in a way, it was where I was conceived because my parents met here at art college. And so although I didn't grow up here, there was the seed of me was seeded in Bristol. So it feels like home. And then I explored action sports and worked with women in action sports, and adventure sports. And then I got pregnant. And I went to an active birth class thinking we are going to be really active, which we were, but then that totally blew my mind. And so when my first baby was born, I continued as a journalist, but I got completely besotted with birth and the rite of passage into motherhood, and the heroine's journey and working with our inner seasons and cycles. And so looking at I've always surrounded myself with outer nature, but looking at the inner nature and the journey through that. And then, so I did that for 10 years. I had a birthing business and I supported over 1,000 women in my community to have more empowered births and mothering experiences. And then a voice said, as it often does, a voice said, okay, it's time now to put that to one side. But for the first time, it didn't tell me what I was supposed to be doing. I was like, okay. So I've just taken it step by step. And during the pandemic, I started working with women in the perimenopausal phase, because it was a natural progression. But what I realized was that for me and the women I was working with, it was so often that very little to do with menopause and everything to do with any symptoms that they were experiencing, especially like anxiety, was what I witnessed repressed creativity. So a massive upwelling of creativity that they didn't know what to do with or where to take it. And often their lives had become very complex. So we worked together to undo things in their relationships, in their relationship with themselves and others. And then they got incredible results in their work and their business. So I pivoted directly into the business space. And yeah, I've been doing that since. It's not where I expected to be, but that voice wasn't going to let me know where I was going. And yeah, so then bringing the nature's outer seasons and the inner seasons together in the way that I hold space in my business. So I'm also a nature-based leadership facilitator and have been on a big journey with that in recent years. But yeah, so the way that I weave nature in is I have an unnetworking group. So I bring a community of women together to create meaningful connection in nature every 6 weeks around the seasons. And then in my one-to-one coaching, if I'm working with them remotely and they're open to it, well, I will introduce nature, connection, and psycho-spiritual practices to kind of reawaken their imagination and intuition. And we'll also help them plan their strategy and their days around their inner cycle, their out and nature seasons. And then with one-to-one, and then I'm also working with the University of Birmingham Business School with their MBA and MSc students on their decolonization program. So I'm doing experiential learning for them within the kind of the business school setting, so that they can explore what it is to be a voice for nature in business and start to look at how they bring regenerative leadership into their business practice. So yeah, things are like, yeah, evolving and unfolding. So it's a thread that I follow.
I'm curious for your perspective about, what is so powerful, impactful, interesting about nature, how it impacts us as individuals, business owners, leaders. What is it about doing business in nature, as you said, like I'm networking, like going out and spending time connecting with other human beings, business owners, leaders, managers, teams out in the wild within different seasons? Like, what is it about nature and the seasonality that really has such a huge impact on, the business results, on our health and well-being, on our positivity or any other things that we obviously want more of in lives?
Yeah, awesome. Okay, it's a great question. So first of all, in nature, with nature, the way that we relate to nature with our language gives you the clue, because we are not separate from nature. Like, we are nature. And as soon as we remove ourselves from nature, then the problem starts. And we see where that has led, the massive separation from nature. So the first aspect of that is recognizing that we are nature. So in terms of, let's relate it directly to burnout. Burnout happens for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons is because we're stuck in eternal summer. We value outward productivity over all else, and we attach our self-worth to having physical creations and being busy in the world. But we know that if there's a like global mental health crisis, that if we continue in that vein, we burn out. And we burn out not just because we're internal summer, but also because we're pushing and forcing ourselves through the more inward aspects of our nature, and overriding the well, I guess we can call shadow, but the inner, deeper work, the journey to the underworld. So we're pushing through that, which takes energy, and we're ignoring, distracting from that. So there's this big latent ball of creative potential that we're pushing it away constantly, and that requires a lot of effort. So when we can really remember that we are nature, and that it's not just about working with, you know, spring, summer, autumn, winter, but we are cyclical beings, and we cycle through, the creative cycle goes through seasons of the year, but we also have that within the month and within the day. And so we have spring before summer, and that's the period of initiation. And that's when ideas like fertilize within our imagination. The outward aspect is summer, is when we've put down the roots and we're bringing things out into outward form, and that's just 1/4 of the creative cycle. The autumn is when we're like shedding, reflecting, releasing, we're gathering the wisdom, and we're celebrating with our community of everything that we've created. And then we have the winter, which is where we've shed all of that, and what looks like doing nothing and deep rest and pause is where the vision of the next cycle starts to form. And the dormancy is actually incredibly active, and that's our imagination. And some people say that kind of capitalism and colonialism is like a time has been a period of de-imagination. We've had our imagination stripped from us because we've had the rest stripped from us. So that's one sense, and feel free to interrupt me at any point. So as soon as you start to see this pattern, you'll see it mapped on everything, and you can apply it to your creative cycle, you can apply it to your planning and your strategy, you can apply it to your, like, when you're sales and marketing, you can apply it to, like, okay, I'm going to be more outward at this time of the month or this time of the year, and then I'm going to be more inward at this time of the month, this time of the year. But then then the other thing that you were asking me about was, you know, why in nature? So why, when we're in nature, do we feel expansive? Why, when we're in nature, do we feel more excited, creative, connected, all of those things? Well, the simple answer is it's our natural environment. We're home. So our body relaxes. And our nervous system drops down and drops down and drops down. So we come out of the sympathetic stress response, and we come down into the parasympathetic, where we're calm, we're connected, we're open, where our intuition is alive and awake, and our relationships with others are healthy. So from that perspective, of course, we're going to do better in business because we're more creative. We have better ideas. We blend our intellect with our intuition. We make better relationships with people. And we are in what people call flow. So we're not second guessing ourselves and our creativity all the time. We're letting ourselves release, create and release, and create and release. So that's why you're going to get better results in your business if you're creating with that deep connection to the source of all being, knowing that you can't get it wrong because you're part of these wider patterns and cycles and you are nature, and your nervous system is relaxed and healthy.
I think it's such a good reminder of the power of nature, but there's also a little bit of a kind of a red light in my mind to say that simply going out into nature does not necessarily bring us these results, does not allow us to absorb and be in nature, because we are very interesting creatures and we're so attached to our devices now. So even when we go out in nature, we might be surrounded by nature, but we might not be one with nature because we will always be on our phones, taking photos, taking videos, taking notes, thinking about what's happening on our laptops, and being still disconnected from the world. Do you have any tips or practices or approaches that you help them then be one with nature and break maybe some of the less helpful habits that we have with always on our phones, always thinking about the next thing, always being, yes, we can be on a walk in a forest and yet not really being absorbed by the forest?
Yeah, which applies to any aspect of our life. We can be in relationship with someone but not be present. And we can be busy and productive but we're not present. So yeah, so I have certain psycho-spiritual practices that I will use with clients who are open to it. And I find, and what's been really interesting, so I have like a particular rite of passage exercise that I do with clients where we set up a threshold and create a threshold crossing so that we step into another way of being, another dimension, and the phones are away, and we've done some work to prepare that soil. So then they have an experience of dropping into an intuitive state, and then I give them some prompts, and that's often, even just in like a 3-hour session, that can be really quite profound for people. And then what I found with Wild Founders is that I don't give any strict instructions like put your phones away. But what I've noticed is from the beginning, there was loads of like videos on social media, on stories, and which is great for raising awareness. But as the year has progressed, and then the last 2 Wild Founders was pretty no one took a video or a picture. So that was really interesting for me, that because we'd cultivated that connection and they knew what that place was like, and doing things like really active and wholehearted listening exercises within it, the need for the phone has just naturally fallen away.
It sounds like as well is creating almost the habit of making an effort to start with, is going for a walk and leaving your phone behind and getting into the habit, instead of thinking, well, I need my phone to take a photo, I need to record this, but just taking moments to help yourself to learn to become present, because we almost have to relearn how to be present in the present. It's the brain goes off and thinks, well, I've got to be doing this, I've got to do that. Oh yes, pretty tree. Oh yes, oh, maybe I should take a photo. And there's this constant, I guess, chatter in your head on what needs to be done, that we almost have to relearn to just, you know what, I'm outdoors. How does it feel? Is it warm? Is it cold? Is it windy? Is it damp? And starting to look instead of focusing on dinner that you're going to cook later, or a problem at work, or taking a photo. And it's about recreating the habit of being present, which we can then bring into cooking or being around people. I mean, how many times I've gone to coffee shops and to meet up with somebody, and everybody's sitting on their phones. They're sitting opposite each other, not talking, but they're all on their phones. And I think it's we've lost the connection or the ability to just slow down and stop and just be present. And this is where I love how you talked about the seasons. You know, the summertime is warm, it's bright, it's time to be more active, whereas winter, it's dark, it's cold, it's miserable. Be more inward, be slower. We don't have to rush off and do everything. And you mentioned it earlier, is this eternal summer. You know, that regardless of what the weather's doing, you go to your job at 8 o'clock and you're doing this and this and this, you turn the heating on or you have lights on, you're getting up at the same time. You're not allowing yourself to just be different in the winter than you are in the spring and summer and autumn. And I think this is something that contributes to the burnout, contributes to all this disconnect that we have with each other, with ourselves. And it's like creating a new habit in our lives, or just finding a way to reconnect. Does that sort of make sense?
It does, but I probably take a slightly different perspective from most people. First, let's stop trying to do anything. Trying to be better people, trying to get it right, trying to be more present, trying to be more nature connected, because that's the same paradigm. And it comes from the place of we're not okay as we are, and that there's something inherently wrong with us, rather than something inherently orientated towards life. So that would be my first kind of thought on that. And then let people be disconnected. I'm not here to help or rescue or save anyone. Let them get lost so that they find the way home. And this is happening on a global scale. Let there be decay, and as hard as that is going to be, and as much suffering as there is already in that, let there be decay, because it's from the decay that the rebirth and the death, from the decay and the death that the rebirth happens. And one day life will call you back.
And I think that that's so true. Is I love how you say one day life will call you back. And as you were talking about the decay, it's almost like going into autumn and winter, because if you think the trees lose their leaves, and during the winter there's that decay on the ground, you know, the leaves are just molding up and waiting for the spring to arrive. And it's when you were talking about that, it was almost like the world is sitting in winter. And but in winter amazing things happen, because you plant your bulbs in the autumn and they sit in the ground, and then in the spring they start to have these shoots. And it's the same with trees. They look like they're dying and the decay is happening, but yet in the spring you get these little green bulbs that come on. And then of course in the summer are they green leaves, or the cherry blossoms, or whatever, the fruit comes. And it's you look at something in the autumn and the winter and you think, oh, I don't even know if that's going to survive. And then in the spring, this new life. So when you were talking about the decay that's happening, it just came to my mind. It's almost like the world is sitting in winter, and waiting for the spring to come out and shoot, or the spring will find them. As you said, life will find them.
I think we're in very early winter. I think we are like autumn, late autumn. I don't think we're quite in winter yet. And when I was working with perimenopausal women, I was like, oh, okay, the whole world's going through perimenopause right now. Okay. So yeah.
Don't say that to the men. I don't think they'll be very amused.
Well, it's the feminine rising, isn't it? It's like Mata Kali, you know, the Hindu goddess Kali. She is all about like death and destruction and burning stuff down, but she's like the mother goddess. And there is also always, you know, we find truth in paradox where there's opposites. And yeah, this is like, okay, here it comes, here she comes.
I've not heard of this Hindu goddess that you mentioned, or Indian goddess that you mentioned, but it is, as you said, the feminine is rising, and it is going more into, I like to think, going more into the gentleness as opposed to the masculine energy. And yeah, it can sound quite scary sometimes, thinking we're only in autumnal, or end of autumn, beginning of winter. But when you think about it, sort of the bigger picture, it's that sort of makes sense. It's, yeah, we still got to really sit in that dark, in that, I don't know, I'm just visualizing a bulb in the ground. It's like dark, it's cold, it's muddy, it's wet, the leaves are just, it's not very pretty. And in winter, especially in the UK, I know in where Lanka is, or in Czech Republic, they've got that beautiful snow where it's white, and it can be really beautiful in winter as well. But in the UK, it's brown, it's grey, it's muddy, a lot of mud everywhere.
Yeah, a lot of mud. But I always think the real beauty of autumn, you like sit and look at the trees. They show you their shape. It's like when everything comes back to its quintessence, the shape and the form of the trees. And yes, it's muddy, but the smell of winter is like sublime. And there's always life when you look. There's always life when you look in winter, no matter, you know, what the season, there's always decay and life within those. Yeah, Kali is really fun. She has a necklace made of skeletons and these like blazing eyes, and she's like extremely fierce. And so yes, the feminine is about the softness, but she's also fierce. She's unforgiving. And the masculine, these are not, for me, they're not gendered. Like, we're not talking about male and female here. We're talking about the masculine energy and the female and feminine energy. And I live in a household of young men and my husband, and the masculinity that is coming through from them is very beautiful. There's a softness, a protect, you know, when the masculine is healthy and allowed to express itself, it's you know, true paternal love. It's benevolence, it's protection, it's containing the creative life force of the feminine and helping that life force come into form. So there's real, this isn't about like women rising and men falling. This is about the feminine rising to meet the masculine, and for those to come into healthy, like fruitful, abundant unity, and partner with one another in a dance, from my perspective.
As you were talking about the winter, I could not stop thinking about January 1st, where after Christmas, after the New Year, everyone starts new year, new me, new year resolutions, word of the year, goals. We're so programmed to really use this as the start of the year, and yet we're still in the dead of winter where nothing new really grows. We should really be still hibernating and slowing down and in this safe cocoon of candles and cakes and stillness, rather that the new year starts more on the spring equinox, where in March, where we're really entering into the spring, that's when, we really have more of the energy and inspiration, and the nature starts guiding us to renew. I'm curious how you then help business owners kind of overcome, or leaders or teams overcome this urge to go with the flow and jump on the trends and not feel the pressure, because I feel the pressure of social media, of the environment, to go with and clear and start hustling. Even now we're end of January, mid of February, so many people are already like, how was your first month? Are you on track with your goals? And I'm like, I still don't know what my goals for this year are, because I'm still in the kind of hibernation.
I would never put a hard stop on. The way I work is quite intuitive and not prescriptive. So if I'm working with someone, I'll be observing them, and I just make suggestions, or I'll ask questions that might help them to find a bit more space than they were giving themselves. And it might not be it, we would more, and also like reframing this idea of what is inward and rest, because I think, it's more for me, it's, well, what activities really nourish you and support your creativity. So for example, I will do more dancing and painting during winter. And the more I give time for that, the more things seem to just kind of flow in my business. And if I was working with a client, and they were getting stuck into that mentality, I would just bring them back to how they're feeling and like what's going on for them, and what space have you made to nourish yourself? How's this sitting with you? Is there anywhere we can like pull back a bit? And anywhere actually you are blocking your energy and you want to go forward. So this has taken a long, long time for us to get into this habit. So it would be a lot for someone to then just go straight into a seasonal framework. So I think each year, and this is the heroine's journey, each year you're cycling, you're descending to the underworld, and you're gathering a little bit more wisdom, and you're descending and you're gathering a bit more wisdom. So it'd be like, it might be this year a client has decided to come together with a group of colleagues and have one day a month together in nature and exploring the theme of wintering. And then next year, that's going to look really different, because then they've got a whole other experience that they've not had before. So we don't know what that wintering is going to look like next year. Or with another client, this is a real pattern with clients, is like they'll say like, I go for it for 6 weeks and then I'm out for 3 weeks. I'm like, yeah. So the choice is here. You can either be forced into winter because your body's going to do it anyway, or you can intentionally start to bring the winter into your creative cycle. And then they're like, oh yeah, so I'm wintering anyway, so it's not like a new concept, but I'm just doing it really unintentionally, and I'm getting to the point where I collapse and I've got no option other than to rest. So that's quite a circular answer, but for me, it's not about being prescriptive. It's about working with someone where they're at and making little fine adjustments and little points of insight and awareness for them, and to make those small changes over time.
Because the body asks for it and demands it when we don't plan for it, when we don't put it in our flow, then we get forced by our body into slowing down and wintering. So choosing when and how we do it rather than having to accept that it's happening no matter what because we've pushed too far, and obviously then it often takes longer and might have some more serious consequences, is such an important thing. But what I also love about what you're saying is just allowing and accepting that we're not gonna get it perfect straight away and we cannot change after listening to this podcast, then be like, okay, so tomorrow I'm starting day cycle, week cycle, month cycle, year cycle. I'm completely redoing everything and I will be fully cyclical with nature. That's a bit too much. Start small, pick one thing, find one way, and then slowly over time, and just giving people the permission not to have it figure out all within 1 year, and acknowledging and accepting that this is a journey for many months, many years, that's probably never going to be finished, and that's okay.
And one other thing that I will do, if we're doing like planning, is I often work with the John Young's Eight Shields format. And so John Young, the Eight Shields, was developed by John Young, who's an amazing, kind of like one of the key nature connection mentors in that world. And this was based on like direct observation of nature and the different qualities of the seasons. And so each season has a theme or a word. So for instance, summer is both play and rest. So the early summer is like play and creativity and out there, and how can we play with, I would say, like, how can you play with your marketing and sales, like, and how can you play with like making this thing happen? Let's just stop taking it so seriously. Let's realize that this is a game. You get to play the game how you want to play. But August is the month of rest, right? August is rest. It's the siesta. And then you take the rest, and then you have the completion in autumn. So we can look at like their year as a whole in 6-week blocks and look at the kind of the word theme for the year, and then go, okay, well, what, if we take that theme with the piece you're working on in your business right now, how would that change it? How would it influence? How would you bring more playfulness rather than the pressure to make sales and be consistent on social media or whatever? Like, how could you play with that? Well, how could you celebrate more? Because this is the thing, in the quest for success and ultra productivity, we forget the celebration, right? Massive part of the seasonal cycle. We would have used to come together around the harvest and eat, drink, and be merry. But we skip that because we're already on to the next thing. So like, how do you really celebrate that? And especially if you're getting frustrated, you want to be further on. That's a really great sign, because you're like at the cusp of growth. But you're always going to be frustrated if you never allow for the celebration and the integration.
And I do think that the celebration, this pause to really take it in, is also an important step in building our confidence. It's an important step in overcoming our self-doubt and potentially, playing smaller than we could have, or feeling the comparisonitis with where others are, because we're always looking often externally, comparing ourselves with others, seeing where they are and what milestones they are celebrating, not acknowledging how far we've come, and feeling that, we can never be there, and feeling not good enough. And is there anything that your work or the work of nature can help us even further with, overcoming the potential self-doubt, playing too small, feeling the lack of confidence to put ourselves there. Magic that we draw from nature to allow us to just shine fully and open ourselves to bigger goals, and yet not feeling the pressure of, are they big enough? Are they impactful enough? Are they worthy enough? Because the world is full of incredible people doing incredible things that can make us feel like we're never going to be whatever that is.
Yeah, great. I love this subject. Just ran a retreat on it. Yeah, so lots of things that nature can teach us. So the first thing is, if you look in nature, you'll see patterns repeated over and over and over again, called fractals. So one pattern that's repeated is a spiralic pattern. All babies are born in a spiral, trees grow in a spiral, muscles attached to our bones in a spiral. And if you look at spirals within nature, you'll see spirals within spirals within spirals within spirals. So that whole spiral won't exist without one of the smaller spirals. And if you believe or allow yourself to imagine that you are part of a much wider pattern that you can't really understand, then you could start to imagine that if you pull back from that pattern, the whole pattern starts to fall apart a bit, and it's not as beautiful and whole as it might be. And then that might lead to like some chaos, and the pattern's there, but it's not quite right. Something's missing. So the more that you acknowledge that you are part of a pattern that you don't understand, and the more you bring yourself into the world in your gifts, in your essence, the more you then start to fall into that pattern, and the more that pattern can open and expand and become more beautiful. So the first thing is to realize, like, you are most wildly insignificant. Like, you are the tiniest, most insignificant speck of anything on this planet, but without you, the whole pattern doesn't look so beautiful. So you're tiny and you're huge at the same time. There's nothing you can do about that. Like, you exist, so there's nothing that's already like a done deal. And then there's so many, like, in different traditions, there's so many different metaphors for this, and one of them I love is Indra's net. So this huge, beautiful net that's cast across the skies, I think. And within the net, there, at each meeting of the threads, there's a jewel. And with each jewel, all the other jewels are reflected. So the more that you kind of peel away the layers so that you can shine more brightly, the more others shine more brightly, and the more brightly you shine. So it's only when we see ourselves as separate and not part of nature and not connected to anyone else that we can fall into comparison and self-doubt. But when we understand ourselves as part of the whole, as a jewel in the whole, then we can turn our attention more to, like, okay, well, how do I show my beauty more? How do I share my gifts more? How do I, smile more today in that knowledge? But yeah, and then the other thing is, we are also at a crisis of too much. So for us, we have to decide what is enough. So you may not be playing it small. You may just be really connected to what's enough for you. And that's not to say the person who has really big goals that might be what the enough that they need to live their purpose into this life. But if we go around thinking that we all need to be the same, then we lose the diversity. So it's what you say about that inner orientation is this enough for me? And is that desire to do more, is that coming from life, my connection to life and life force? Or is it becoming because I feel I have to do more because that's what everyone else is doing?
That is such an important point. It's sometimes really hard to, again, take this time for introspection and truly understand if what we're chasing and what we think we want to be doing and having and accomplishing is something that we feel inspired and pushed and motivated to do by our values, by our desires, by something that's coming from within, or if, again, it's just looking around in the world and see others and feel like this is what we should be doing. And here on this podcast, we definitely try to break through all the shooting of ourselves and find the alignment of like, this is what I want to be doing rather than feeling that I should be doing it.
So I was wanting to give a practical example of like what is enough. So I have a very small boutique business. I work with a small number of clients. That really works for my energy. I'm not here to be a massive creator, but the clients I work with, you know, I've got 2,500 or something, a relatively small following on LinkedIn. But the clients I work with, they often have like tens of thousands of followers. They're like thought leaders, and they are out there people, and they do grow bigger things. But because so I'm not a mentor in a traditional sense that I'm mentoring from a place of hierarchy. I'm mentoring from a pairing of masculine and feminine energies. So I'll work with men or women who are more in their masculine, and I'll bring a more feminine perspective, and then we can collaborate and create flow. But that doesn't mean that I don't ever have doubt and think, well, to be a business mentor, I've got to have had this like massive business. No, I have the business that is enough and works and evolves naturally with me and who I am and where I'm at. And that's what I help my clients do, to find their own synergy, their own enoughness, and then find the simplicity and flow within that. So we have to move, and this is part of like the decolonization, is yes, the diversity and richness that nature models, and breaking down the hierarchies that we place within ourselves and in relationship to others.
This has been something I've been pondering a lot lately. Is our obsession with numbers. It's the need to really put everything in numbers and see our value and our success and feel accomplished and satisfied only when we have numbers. It's the how many kilos have we lost, how many thousands a month we make, how many miles we have run, how many kilometers we've driven. Any kind of a number, we always focus on what is the number rather than what was the quality of the experience, what was the feeling that we got, what enjoyment did we have. And I can imagine that for you, it must be part of the conversation for people. Yes, you maybe want 5K a month business, 10K a month business, six-figure business. But aside from those numbers, what are you hoping those numbers will be able to do for you? What is it that really truly matters to you? And is it the number itself that brings you joy? Or what is the number enabling you to do? What kind of a life you're hoping it's going to allow you to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, if we think about it from a business perspective, we have to create a degree of comfort to meet people where they're at, right? So when I'm giving a talk about intuition, I will bring in, and blending that with intellect, I'll bring in the science, because I know we don't need the science because we've always known it, but there's such a level of discomfort with not knowing and leaning into the mystery of life that the science brings a level of comfort. So if we can take a step back and actually go, okay, so tangible results, yes, let's play with that in our marketing. It's a game, let's play with it. So a woman came on a retreat I ran the other week, and we had a follow-up conversation, and she had the confidence going out of that retreat to offer an ongoing package to an existing client, which was like £5,000 or something like that. So I was like, oh, so what's the return on investment on that? And we looked at like 2,513% return on investment. I said, well, that's pretty good return on investment in a week. So let's have fun, like use those and have fun with it. And we can play the system, but we can also disrupt that system by speaking exactly as you say to the quality of the experience. Okay, so yes, there's the numbers, but what I'm going to choose to do this in a way that feels good, essentially. And I can tell you that I have clients who have people begging to pay them like £20,000. But the minute that that's been paid, they've forgotten about it. And they're worried about where the income is coming in. So it's the celebration piece as well. So how do you experience receiving? And like, how did you create that money? Was it from fear or scarcity and burnout and ultra productivity? Or was it with joy and ease and flow and abundance and gratitude? And then you can see, you can play with it. You can see the world through two different lenses. And people think that when you come from that, you know, move away from the fear and scarcity, that you're going to lose the results. And I would love to package this up and engineer it, but all I can say is that the opposite happens. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, you know. You're in that dark tunnel of manifestation, you're doing things differently, and you're taking the steps with a different energy, and it takes a while to rebirth. But it's going to happen, and it's going to feel so much more joyful. And you're going to be living your life. And one of the most, I think one of the most moving things a client has ever said to me was, she said, I went for a walk in the woods with my children and I held their hand, and for the first time I really held their hands. And she was filled with both grief and joy that she had the presence to recognize that she was in the woods and appreciating the leaves and feeling her children's hands in her hands, and grief, because how many moments had she not experienced that?
Hop on to our Patreon account to get this episode's amazing and wonderful gold nugget. Now, if people want to connect with you or just find ways that they can, as Lenka said, you have such beautiful posts on LinkedIn, how can people find you? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram. I'm more active on LinkedIn. Jessica Adams Holistic Success, and then my website is jessicaadams.co. jessicaadams.co. Yeah, so you can connect with me through those. I'd love to hear from people. And yeah, if this has particularly resonated with anyone, I'd love to hear those insights and kind of what, you know, their number one takeaways or sparks of life were for them, any insights or ahas.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today, sharing your energy and wisdom, and talking about the different, the feminine and the masculine energies. And I love how the spirals, and people who are watching on YouTube, your hands, your expressions with your hands, you describe things with your hands. So for those just listening on the podcast, unfortunately you'll miss that, but hop onto YouTube and look at Jessica's expressions with her hands. It's been amazing to watch as we've been speaking. So again, thank you so much for your time and energy today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Natalie and Lenka. It's been a real absolute joy.
And for our listeners, what have you got from today? Is this something that you're thinking, oh, wow, I need to really start to look into it? Or are you starting to hear yourself, about the different cycles? Are you starting to want more cyclical rhythms in your life? Or is this totally new concept and you're thinking, what? I don't understand? Or reach out to Jessica, or re-listen to the episode, or start to look into it. But what have you got from today? What wisdom or aha moments have you just received? We would love to know your thoughts and what you think of the feminine and masculine energy. Do share with us. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.